Ian Pryor is the executive director of the group Fight for Schools, and he's also the senior counsel for Unsilenced Majority and a parent in that very county we were just talking about, Loudoun County, Virginia. He's pushing back hard on the Loudoun County School Board and leading the charge to save the kids. I thought here in Texas, we had a big old fight, and we just had municipal elections, and I thought what we all went through was pretty rough. Then I see these videos of parents being arrested at school board meetings for doing nothing more than just loudly expressing dissent, which is still allowed. Is that the most heated that it's become? Or is there stuff that we've missed? Because that was pretty insane.
That was definitely the most heated it's become. Really, it was a culmination, I think, of a year and a half worth of frustration from parents. It started out with the open schools movement. The school board wasn't listening to parents. They were mocking parents on social media and emails. And then when you get to mid-March, that's when you had these 6 school board members that were part of this private Facebook group where one of the school board members essentially lit a fire, and you had all these people in there listing dozens of parents that spoke up at school board meetings, and they wanted to infiltrate their groups, publicly expose them, even hack their websites. So really, it was about probably 8 of us that got together on someone's back deck in March and said, listen, we've got to recall these school board members. They have been an abject failure for their time in office, and it's really started to grow because every time we think that, okay, this is going to be a long road to get these signatures to recall them. They go and they step in it again, whether it's putting a teacher on administrative leave for exercising his First Amendment rights, or this Tuesday you saw there were 250 speakers lined up to speak. They didn't like what the people had to say, so after 50 or so, they cut off public comment, and then the superintendent declared, that this is an unlawful assembly, even though there was no threats of violence, nothing, and that's what you saw on Tuesday night. But that was by far the biggest crowd we've ever seen there.
And you mentioned that Facebook group. Talking to Ian Pryor, has been leading that fight there in Loudoun County, Virginia. This was insane to me. This 624-member private group on Facebook, where they were essentially, these are school board members. They were gossiping about you all. And this also was really shocking to me. It said that the Sheriff's Criminal Investigations Division was reviewing the matter, but the group's activities were no surprise to top law enforcement because the county's prosecutor appears to also be a member of the Facebook group. And I have to say, Ian, my favorite thing about that aspect of the story was a local mother named Jen Durham, which I think she was the one who was really kind of trying to really light that fire, said, quote, "Anyone know any hackers," end quote, which is perhaps maybe the most "may I speak to the manager" thing I've ever heard in my life. And you were on that list. They named you. You had a neighbor who named you.
Yeah, that's right. So I was on the list. I was actually listed twice, once for writing an article in the Federalist, and the second time, amazingly, was for going to a school board meeting and speaking up for First Amendment rights of teachers and students back in, I think, October of 2020. And, a lot of the people that were on that list, it's kind of branded as they were speaking out against critical race theory, but the vast majority of people on that list had gone to school board meetings trying to get schools reopened. And then just this past week, we revealed on Monday something that we hadn't known before, that there was a second private Facebook group back in 2020 that had 7 school board members, and they were basically discussing school opening and closing policy to the exclusion of 99% of the community. So what you have here is a school board that doesn't respect the rule of law, doesn't respect Virginia open meetings law, doesn't respect the First Amendment of the Constitution, and ignores their own code of conduct.
Yeah, that's what happened in where I am in Carroll ISD in South Lake, Texas. They had the school board members that were violating Texas's Open Meetings Act and talking about implementing the CRT curriculum in this plan going forward in school without any knowledge from parents. It took a lot of FOIA requests to get that. I love that you said that you all met on somebody's back deck. That's probably the most American thing ever. It just kind of gets to the heart of this issue. You said too that really all of this began in October of 2020, and I was thinking about this when I was looking back to see when I could first see some of the objections to a lot of the curriculum and when it really was hitting a high note, that when CRT being implemented in schools across the country. Do you think that this was caught, or at least enough parents paid attention to this because of the lockdown? And that maybe if we hadn't had a lockdown, I hate even saying this, would this have been caught to the extent that it was?
Yeah, absolutely not. I think this was 100% due to the pandemic. I mean, you have children that are in front of their Chromebooks, parents working at home, and really the curtain was peeled back on what was going on in schools. And now I've said this many times, when you want to look at somebody who to blame to let this happen, we got to take a look in the mirror, because over the past 10 years, 20 years, whatever it is, we've ignored local elections. We've assumed that we send our kids those two doors at school, that everything's going to be safe and they're going to learn what they're supposed to be learning: math, science, etc. But in reality, that's not what they're focusing on. While kids are suffering massive learning loss, they're falling behind in math and science. You have these school boards and these school administrations focus on changing names of mascots and how to train a young generation of activists, when that is not what schooling is about. It's about preparing the future generations to succeed in the world, going forward.
Yeah, we heard some of the excerpts, the parents reading some of the material. That did not sound like, it sounded like YouTube comments. It did not sound like any kind of literary material that was going to provide any kind of education at all whatsoever. This, and we're talking to Ian Pryor, who's been fighting this in Loudoun County, Virginia. There are a lot of, I wanted to get your reaction to a lot of these critical race theory proponents out there who say, no, you people are incorrect. This is not critical race theory. This is education, and how this narrative now is manufactured with all these different governors signing legislation banning the institutionalized Marxist racism being implemented in schools. They're saying, no. Now they're saying that you can't even teach about slavery or anything that's happened in America's past. I'm not aware of anything like that being specified or spelled out in any legislation. Are you?
No, absolutely not. And I find that response and those talking points ludicrous, that somehow we don't want history being taught in an accurate way. No, of course not. But when you're talking about second graders, kindergartners, third graders, there's a time and a place for how you explain the context of how things develop. And the time and the place is not second, third, fourth grade. So I would tell all those people that say, yeah, we should absolutely teach, kindergartners right off the bat that, the founding fathers were racist. Well, why don't you also tell them that there's no such thing as Santa Claus and there's no such thing as the Easter Bunny? Because obviously there are things that are age appropriate to get into. And when you get into high school and you get into college, as long as you teach different perspectives and you don't force one perspective down kids' throats, that's fine. Allow people to think critically. That's how they develop, and that's how they learn the causes and effects of various things that happen throughout history. But what they want to do is present one side that is really this half-baked theory that has not been tested, and they want to test it in our schools, and that is what we're seeing all throughout the country.
Yeah, Ian, one last question for you on this. You were mentioning earlier how kids have been suffering from having schools locked down, although it allowed parents to get some really good insight into what was being done to kids. I mean, I look at some of this stuff and it seems emotionally abusive, very abusive to kids. Have you all spoken about what kind of impact this education has had, or this CRT has had on your kids? Have students in the area spoken out about what impact having that directed at them, the privilege, et cetera, what effect that's had on their lives and morale?
Yeah, certainly there have been a lot of students that have talked about this at school board meetings, but what you really see is when they come home and talk to their parents. Somebody that lives across the street from me, her second grade daughter came home and she's like, Mommy, today I learned that women and minorities never get credit for anything they do. Those are the kind of things that you're seeing, where these little kids come home and they don't necessarily understand what they're being taught. I have a second grader. I read her a book about, Columbus coming to the New World. The next day she comes back to me and she says, Daddy, why did you read me a book about a bad guy? We learned today that he was a murderer and he had a lot of slaves. Now, of course, you can talk about those kind of things when you're in high school, but I went back and looked at the video. I mean, it was a cartoon with piles of dead bodies in it. That is absolutely inappropriate for second graders to be learning.
Yeah, completely inappropriate. And these are, and for educational systems that want to pride themselves on historical accuracy and fact, they want to incorporate the 1619 project, where even some communists were objecting to that because they said it made them, the historical inaccuracy made them look bad. It's just insane to me.